finish at 2:30. Very happy to be here. This is what's called New Life or New Life Fellowship. Yeah. Alliance, connection to Alliance. I guess that's the only denomination in heaven. So they claim. Glory. Before I share, we've lost a great servant of God, Arnold Flett, which is your cousin, right, Conrad? This is about a month ago now. And before that, about a week before, another friend of mine died. His name was James Moses Jr. Passed away, son of the late James Moses. You know, I ran into James Jr. 3 years ago up at a place called Black Duck Lake in Minnesota. It's the middle of nowhere. I made a wrong turn. I had to go ask at this gas station, and I ran into James at that gas station. And what was so profound was he had been on the road for, I don't know, 2.5 weeks. He was up in the Gulf of Mexico. Is there a place called Corpus Christi? That's where he was. And he made things right with the Lord there and got baptized there. And he comes across from the southern states. And as he's traveling, he says, God, could you bring Gary to me, my dad's friend and co-worker? And I ran into him at Black Duck, like a little town in the middle of nowhere. Well, he passed before Arnold Flett. Another fellow that was very close to me, his name is Tony Angus. He's an old man, about 80, 83 years old. He passed away about 2 months ago now. When I was sick in this pancreatic cancer, I asked Tony if he could sing in my funeral because Tony used to sing in a symphony, good singer. And he said yes. When I was given 28 days to live and sent home to die, that 28-day mark went past that. So several months later, I ran into Tony. He's an old man. He says, Gary, when are you going to die? I'm tired of practicing. And then a year go by and I see him again. He says, he says, Gary, if for some reason I should die before you, could you sing that song in my funeral? And he passed. So I want to sing that song for him. The song that I wanted him to sing in my funeral. And I want to sing the song as an encouragement to all of us. You ever hear a dog howl, Florence? Oh, that's how I sing. Hallelujah. You know, singing is not my thing. A lot of people love singing, but Carl, that guy sings great. Yeah, and his wife there just kind of falls apart and melts. And he sings, right, Carl? He says, glory. Now here's the song. I hope you bear with me. But it's the words that I want to convey to you. It's called I Traveled Down a Lonely Road. I traveled down the lonely road, and no one seemed to care. The burden on my weary back had bowed me to despair. I oft complained to Jesus how folks were treating me. And then I heard him say so tenderly, my feet were also weary upon the Calvary road. The cross became so heavy, I fell beneath the load. Be faithful, weary pilgrim, the morning I can see. Just lift your cross and follow close to me. I work so hard for Jesus, I often boast and say, I've sacrificed a lot of things to walk the narrow way. And it says, I gave up fame and fortune, I'm worth a lot to thee. And then I hear him gently say to me, I left the throne of glory and counted it but loss. My hands were nailed in anger upon the cruel cross. But now we'll make the journey with your hand safe in mine. So lift your cross and follow close to me. Third verse goes like this. Oh Jesus, if I die upon a foreign field someday, 'twould be no more than love demands, no less could I repay. No greater love hath mortal man than for a friend to die. These are the words he gently spoke to me. If just a cup of water I place within your hand, then just a cup of water is all that I demand. But if by death to living they might thy glory see, I'll take my cross and follow close to thee. So that's what I sang. I wanted this old man to sing my funeral. He used to sing in a symphony, and he probably doesn't have the voice that I have. Had a really good voice. Anyway, let me share with you stories. If we turn to Luke 18, this is a thought of encouragement. And I don't know if you're troubled or if you're in a very hard place. And but here's Luke chapter 18, verse 1. And he spake a parable unto them to this end. Now the verse starts off with the letter N, meaning that it's connected from the previous chapter. Whatever he's saying in previous chapter is connected to what he's saying here. It says, and he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not faint. You know this, if I had a title of this message, I would call it courtroom experience. You ever go to a courthouse, into a courtroom? When you go there, you have to turn your cell phone off or whatever, and you come into that place, you have to kind of stop and bow before the judge and say, if you get to talk, say, worship, your honor. Well, what happens is this. If you're a child of God, truly born again, you have that access to God all the time, 24/7, 7 days a week. Our God, one of the attributes of God is He never sleeps. We humans who are finite, we got to sleep. You know why we have to sleep, Conrad? Our brain has to re-register, re-regulate. It has to stop, right? But God, because it's God, He doesn't sleep. He watches over us. Anyway, I want to encourage you by my thoughts. I'm asking, are you troubled? Are you in a situation where it's very stressful and maybe you're worried about things? Well, when Jesus said that men ought always to pray and not faint, He's trying to tell His people that there is a way, there is sort of like a thing that God has provided for you when you're in this state of great distress. Now in chapter 17, before that, in verses 26, if you turn to chapter 17, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. Now, in the days of Noah, if you kind of want to see what it was like in the days of Noah, if you turn to Genesis chapter 6. Turn with me over there, follow along. I want to show you something here. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Notice what it was like in Noah's day. You know, when it talks about the wickedness of man, there is so much unrest, there's so much chaos and confusion. There's a lot of suffering. Maybe there's a lot of violence and murder and maybe abuse. And I can just see what, sort of a bit of what I see in the north here in our Indian country communities. There's so much heartache, so much grief. Kids are being abandoned. And the wickedness of man just carries on. And what he's saying here is, now in Luke 17, he not only talks about Noah, but in also verse 27, it says, they did eat and drink and married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Verse 28, likewise, also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat and drink, and they bought and they sold and they planted and built. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So you see this wickedness. At the time of Lot, there was a lot of sexual perversion. There was homosexuality and lesbianism, and we now hear a term is it B? What is it? Is that lesbian, gay?
LGBT, I think. Lesbian, gay, bisexual,
bisexual,
yeah,
transgender, queer, and +2. You know what +2 is? Two-spirited. So when you have this kind of lifestyle in the communities, it's very unpredictable, it's very dangerous. The wickedness of man is pervasive. And little children are exposed to this kind of thing. You know, we now live in a time of globalism. In fact, there is a pagan religiosity in our times. In fact, this pagan religiosity, we can call it pantheism. Pantheism is a worship of many gods, but everything is okay, you know. And because we share the gospel, the pantheist will actually sit there and listen to it, right? And include what we're saying about Jesus and the message of the gospel as just one of the many gods they worship. Right? But we need to kind of remind them that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is Jesus is the only way, right? Pantheism. Jesus just becomes one of the many gods for convenience sake. Jesus, the gospel, is just inserted in there to appease the heart. And many are deceived. I want to share with you some stories where the term says, a man ought always to pray and not faint. I grew up in a home where, the missionaries came to our village in 1952, Cliff McComb. And in 1953, a revival broke in our community. My mother became a Christian in 1953. I was born in 1954. This ooey gooey thing crawled from under a rock, and Mom saw me and says, "Let's take him." Wipe me clean. Well, I don't know, if I was in my mother's womb when my mother got saved. But I remember those early years as a little kid. Mom was a praying woman. And what had happened was, because my mom became a Christian, my father, who was into this traditional path, couldn't stay in the same house. And my father left my mom. So my mother raised us children by herself. And there are many things that occurred in this family setting where dad is gone and dad is on the other side of the road with another woman and all that stuff. And there's no social services. There's no means for feeding us. But my mom went to church. Mom listened to the messages. And they used to have a Bible, like this black cover with red color here. And in that Bible, they have pictures, colorful pictures. So my mother, when she would come home, she would then tell us what she heard in the church to us little kids. And I was so inspired just seeing the picture of Jesus. He may not have looked like that in what was portrayed in the picture, but this Jesus sort of became real to me, fascinated and sort of, intrigued. But as a sinner, my mind and heart was closed. I did not understand. I did not comprehend what it is, And I grew up to be a teenager, got into things, and there's things that also happened in my life that really kind of shot me in the wrong direction of life. You know, when I was 10 years old, I saw a man commit suicide with a shotgun. And as a 10-year-old boy, the man turns a shotgun, shoots himself, right? I can, to this day, I'm 66 years old. The flesh that flew out of his back is still with me. It so much shocked me. I would never be the same. But you know what the tragic story was? Really? That man who took his life had found his wife in bed with another man. You know who that other man was, really? My dad. And I'm an innocent little boy outside hunting birds, not even knowing that this was going on in our community, my family. And upon hearing it, when the police came and took Dad away, the shame, the anger, right? When I was 14 years old, I was assaulted by 5 men. I was sexually violated. They tore me up. You know what they did to me, Conrad? They ripped my testicles. I could never have kids. Always wanted a son and daughter. And I can't have kids. And so that experience, it just kind of sold my life into this destructive lifestyle. But I want to tell you this, my mother was a woman of prayer, and I didn't know that. You know, the courtroom experience, I remember there was one time we didn't have no food. Maybe 3 days without food. We had a log house, there's frost in the floor there. We had a pot-belly stove. We were so desperate. My mother got on the floor on her knees and sat there, and I asked us kids to come around her. James, Randy, Nora, Sharon. I think Joan was a baby. This is like 1962, 63. She says, got herself a big carpenter's pencil and a cardboard board paper, and she says, oh, I could do it. It's okay. She says, I want to talk to God. And he said, ask James, the older boy, my older brother. James, what do you want? James says, I want jam. Jam. Not just any jam, I want raspberry jam. Not just small jam, I want a big kind of jam. So my mother, James on down jam, raspberry jam. I'm the next one. So Gary, what do you want? I said, I want peanut butter. I remember having peanut butter one time, and I said, oh, I gotta eat it again. So I want a big can of peanut butter. So my mother, Gary, he calls me peanut butter. Then he turns to my younger brother, Randy. Oh, Randy, Goganiki. He calls her Onani. Onani. He says, what do you want? And Randy says, I want Wachitamokusin. Now, Wachitamokusin is, a runner with a black liner with a white, lace, whatever. I want Wachitamokusin. My mom, she writes it. Randy was doing. And Randy wants it, I think it was like size 5 or something. And I don't know what Nora wanted, maybe they're too young. And so she also wrote her what she needed. Of course you can, I know, all those things she puts down, sugar. And then she prays. As she's praying, she got very into it, very earnest prayer, but very quiet prayer, humble prayer, but real prayer. And tears came down her face. And we were there, we were praying. After she stopped praying, she said, Amen. And she turns to all of us, oh, can you not? Amen to you. All of us said, Amen. So now I said, you got to get up and work. Got to get kindling, cut wood, and maybe go get water from the lake, and go to the bush and check the snares. All day thing. We come back towards evening. I asked Mom, so where's the answer? Wow, they gotta wait. You know what, Denise? Nothing came that night. Went to bed hungry. Really troubled. Hungry. Cold. But you know the next morning? Cold. Winter day. Blue sky. Hear this plane. It's a big Norse, right? And it landed at the Beardy's Point, they call it. A big Norseman on skis landed. Transair had landed. The prop in that plane never stopped. It was so cold. The pilot threw out 4 boxes. We didn't know. Next thing you know, some time later, the door flew open. The guy says to Mom, oh, Kadiana, this is yours. 4 big boxes came in. This is before airstrips, before sked flies, before there was nothing there. There's no means of travel. In those 4 boxes was a can of jam for James. Big can. In that big box was a big can of peanut butter for me. And lo and behold, my younger brother got his vegetables and shoes at that right size. Everything we asked for in detail was right there. Yeah. Courtroom experience. And I didn't know. I was so caught up in this, my dad leaving us. There's a sense of fear and abandonment. There's hunger and there's uncertainty and all this stuff. And yet my mom, as troubled and as one who's betrayed with such pain and hurt in her soul, she dared to believe in Jesus Christ and humble herself to God. And she led us in prayer. You know, folks, I never forgot that prayer. But because I'm a little guy who sort of had a distorted perspective of life, I didn't get it. You know. Another thing that happened was April 1976. Springtime. That was my first full year at Bible school at Keewatin Bible School. Come home to Round Lake, and a week after I got home, the whole family went for spring trapping. And so, the used Skiddles, the ice is just bare, there's no snow, this huge lake. We're going westward. My mom and dad, my oldest sister and her husband, and my brother James was there with his wife Mary Lou, and a bunch of us. We went spring tracking. I had my gun, shotgun with a single shot, with a case of 25 shells. One night when we were out there, no, I was Christian already. 1 year Bible school. One night, a flock of snow geese came. This watch doesn't work. It's already existing. Flock of snow geese came. And my father would take turns with James, me, and Randy. So that night was my turn. And it's sort of like maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, windy, storm, white caps. And he said, "You come with me." I said, "Take my gun?" She said, "No. You're going to leave your gun. I'll be the only one shooting." So we go paddling. As we see the mouth of the river, there's still ice on the lake, but about a mile, or maybe half a mile was open. That's where the geese landed. So I'm in the back, When you paddle like this, right? You can't lift the paddle out of the water, you have to let it run. As we come closer, lots of geese. The sound out there is just deafening. And my dad has 5 loaded shotguns. I think 5 per shot per gun. That's 25 shots. When you start firing, you just see fire out of the. And afterwards, we picked up the dead ones, but there were 2 that had broken wings. So my dad got one, and the other one were chasing it, and it came up on this side. Now inside the canoe is just a layer of ice. It's windy. It's really like a really cold night. When it came up on this side, my dad turns around and says, "Take it easy. Back up. You're going to tip the canoe," he says, "a boat." And I thought it was close, but I guess in the nighttime, I guess it's further out. And as I lunged at that thing, I overcommitted myself, and I capsized the canoe. And my dad had turned like this, and he had a parka, boilers on. It was very cold. We had winter parkas. Went into the water. I was screaming. When you really, really scream hard, your voice breaks up in 2 or 3 parts. That's what happened to me. I didn't know where my dad was. Next thing I know, sometime where he came up close to me, he says it was about drowning. And I called on God. God help us. And all of a sudden, Denise, I tell you this. You know what happened to me? All of a sudden I had strength. I picked up my dad with my one arm. He's soaked with parka and oilers and boots. I picked him up and put him on top of the capsized canoe. And hung on. Now I found myself not where I was sitting in the back, but I found myself on the other end of the canoe, where that point is. And I'm hanging on for dear life because it's going to slip. The water would come and bury my head. hang on, and Chris was just like this, could barely breathe. Just calling on God. And all of a sudden, I tell you this, I felt a stone, a rock, on my feet. It was slimy, it was slippery, but there was a ledge to it. I put two of my feet in there, and I just stood there. And then, you know what happened? That big wind that was there, all of a sudden it just calm as can be. And then we hear somebody coming. It was my brother and brother-in-law. It's so dark, they would come by and miss us. They'd stop the motor, come back again, miss us again, and stop again, and finally found us. Yeah. Courtroom experience. I didn't know I had access to God. God was free. I didn't have to pay for it, and I wasn't using it. And yet at that moment, out of desperation, I called on God. They picked us up. They pulled me up first, and my dad, three of us, could hardly pull my dad into the boat. That's how heavy he was. And yet, I used one arm and threw him on top. Courtroom experience. I didn't know I had access to the very throne of God. I knew that. My mother, when she prayed when Dad left and abandoned us and we're starving to death, there's no social service, no welfare, nothing, no one around. My mother dared to get on her knees and pray. And she wrote down specifically what we wanted. As ridiculous as peanut butter is for a young boy, God answered that prayer. And here I was, years later, in this predicament, April 1976, the first year of Bible school. Drowning there out in the lake, freezing. The wind died. After they picked us up, the wind started again. The next day when we went to find the guns, we had floated, I don't know, quarter mile, maybe less. And where we had left the anchor, thinking that's where the guns were, it was a quarter mile away where it floated in a strong wind. You know how deep it was where we left the anchor, Florence? It's about 25 feet. It's higher than this. The guns went down and fell upside down, and the silver part was reflecting in the sun. And yet, I knew I stood on the rock. There's no rock there. What am I trying to say to you? Are you in a situation where you look all sort of use common sense and there's no way, there's nothing there for you? I'm saying God is there for you. Remember the disciples? These crowds of people are following Jesus, and they're in this wilderness, and the disciples said to Jesus, you should send these people up. We don't have nothing to feed them. Right? They're in a desert place, and all they saw was the desert, the wilderness, and that's all they believed in. That's what they understood. Jesus prayed. And he fed the hungry. Right? You know what the difference is between these pagan religiosity people, these religions that are all over the world, that are propagating their faith, as compared to a simple faith in Jesus Christ that you have? You know the only difference is? You have access to God. They don't. But Baal worshippers during the time of Elijah, oh, they shouted and screamed and danced and all day. Elijah said, listen, could you kind of put water on the sacrifice? Pour water. Could you just do it one more time? They dressed it up. Do it one more time, you know. Elijah prayed. Simple prayer. You know what it says? Fire of God came from heaven. I want to encourage you. If you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and you believe his book, don't ever get discouraged. God is with you. He hears you. I was going to tell you another story, but my time is gone. It's 2:31, and the guy's eyes are just piercing. We don't allow Indian time here, he says. I'm just kidding. I'm telling you to encourage you, you know, that open door to God is with you at all times. And of all the stuff that I've gone through in my life, I never knew. God is with me. And I hope you walk out of here realizing, hey, God is with me. God knows what's going on in my life. Maybe it's sickness, maybe it's home situation, whatever it is. God is with you. And humble yourself to him. Say, God, I deposit everything about me. I'm going to follow you. And may God bless his word.